Hey folks, Carolyn here to tell you just a little bit about the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. It's a free text message-based, confidential emotional support hotline that was created specifically for the gaming community. So whether you're a player, a developer, a streamer, a competitor, any part of the gaming community, the hotline is here for you, ready to provide emotional support or help finding the referrals and resources that you may need. Visit gameshotline.org for more information.
One of the things that actor says is it was a really feminist film. And I think in 1999, I probably would have thought the same thing without really questioning what that means.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two women who would not run halfway across Berlin in 20 minutes to save their doomed boyfriends. Carolyn Pettit.
Sorry, Manny.
And Ebony Adams.
Manny, you are on your own.
Yeah.
This week, we're dyeing our hair red and heading back to 1999 to talk all about Tom Tykwer's innovative thriller, Run Lola Run, which was chosen by our patrons.
Yay!
Yeah!
I mean, you had three choices, and this is what you picked. So this is on you, everybody. Stay tuned. Hello, friends.
What's
Hey!
up?
Yeah, so this is an episode that our patrons chose. We gave them three options of time loop movies because I've been really into time loop movies lately.
Yeah.
And I secretly was pleased that this was the choice because it was one that I wanted to watch for research for myself.
There you go. See? Sometimes it works out. I don't remember what the other choices were.
Yeah, it was Groundhog's Day. And Edge of Tomorrow, which I love that movie. I would absolutely watch that again in a heartbeat. And then this one, Run Lola Run.
Oh. Now see, I forgot that we were asking the audience to select a time loop movie because I absolutely would have asked for Clue, which is not really a time loop movie, but it does kind of play around with, alternate scenarios, as does Run Lola Run. But I love the Clue loop, the Cloop, as I would call it.
But did you know? So, I mean, if you watch Clue today, yes, it has that loop effect in, particularly the ending, right? You get this solution and then this solution and then this solution. But when that film was originally released, it was, I don't know if, people who love that film today know this.
Me?
But it was, this theater is showing ending A, this theater is showing ending B, and this theater.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so it was, it was like a ploy to get people to see the movie multiple times, as opposed to.
That's cool.
Kind of. I mean, at the time,
it did not work.
It did not work. A little, because, it's like, you're going to pay multiple times to sit through. I mean, because the first 85 minutes, or I don't know how much, are the same. I don't know. It was not.
Now you would just do something on Netflix or whatever where you just can pick through the endings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I never saw Clue. I've watched the first 15 minutes of it, but I've never actually seen the whole thing. I feel like I should. And whenever it pops up on a streaming service, I'm like, oh yeah, I should watch that. But I have no. It
is one of my comfort watches. I do think Clue is hilarious. And I mean, I'm glad that I own it on DVD, which I do.
I have a friend who was recovering from a really intense leg injury and was bedridden and watched Clue every single night while going to sleep for 2 months.
It's great. It is a fantastic, comfort watch, but also everybody in it is hilarious, just fantastic performances. But Tim Curry, I mean, come on, so good, good.
Is
Madeline
Tim Curry
Kahn,
still alive?
Yes.
Is he doing? Does he do things? Has he been in things recently?
I don't think so. I feel like he's been ill recently. I want to say that he had been
ill. Are you making that up, or are you
what? Why would I make up some banana cracker lie about Tim Curry being ill? What would be the point?
I feel so. I'm I don't know. Maybe you just have an intuition about Tim Curry.
No, I don't mean the spirits are telling me. I looked in my magic 8-ball and it was chances are good Tim Curry's not doing well. No, I believe that I read that he had been ill. And now, of course, our wonderful listeners will hit me up and be like, I don't know where you got that. Tim Curry is great. He's doing lots of theater, whatever. But that's my vague pop culture memory. I'm not good as a co-host, you guys. I give you feelings. I give you vibes. That's what I'm here for, not facts.
Nobody comes here for the real deal. It's fine.
No, I think the people who listen to Caro, are like, you know what? I can count on at least a third of every episode being like diligently researched, being like effectively delivered. The rest is just, hot garbage.
With that, let's get into this week's hot garbage episode. 1999 was an exciting year for cinema. In March of that year, moviegoers at cineplexes all over the world had their minds blown by The Matrix. A few months later, the American art house circuit was set ablaze by a propulsive thriller from Germany called Run Lola Run. Starring Franka Potente as Lola, the film is always in motion, visually and narratively, as a protagonist races against time in a desperate effort to rescue her hapless lover, Manny, from a gangster's wrath. The film also employs a kind of time loop device as Lola tries 3 separate times to save Manny, and through this format, it explores larger questions about the role that chance plays in our lives. Can I start?
Yes.
With some hot trash?
That's what 2/3 of the podcast is for.
That's the brand, apparently, as we
Let's
just established.
rename the show Hot Trash. I feel like more people would actually start listening and be like, oh, this isn't trash enough.
Hey, at least truth in advertising, finally,
Yeah.
I think we could finally start selling a lot of merch if we were called Hot Trash. I think people would buy those t-shirts.
Hell yeah. Why don't we sell the t-shirts for our fake podcast and see if people would buy them?
Done.
It'll be like a performance art, Ebony. Okay, my hot trash take is that I got legitimately exhausted and stressed out watching her run. Like, I was like, I don't think I can keep watching this. I'm so tired for you. And I read an article, like a 20-year retrospective, where she was like, dude, I smoked like 2 packs a day. I wasn't a runner. I was running in Doc Martens the whole time. Like, it was not a good experience.
I read that same thing. I think you're talking about, it was in The Guardian. And I was like, yeah, remember your 20s where you could smoke 2 packs a day and still run like that? But what I appreciated is how she said, like, we didn't want it to look like I was an athlete. Because, that would have, it would have been jarring. In this instance, I think it helps the verisimilitude that occasionally she's like booking it all out, and other times you can tell like she is starting to get winded. In fact, at the end, the final loop where Manny is chasing the homeless guy who has his bag on his bike, and he has to stop. Like he pulls him over with the gun. And he stops and he's breathing all hard and can't talk for a minute. I was like, Lola's been running this whole movie. Suck it up, Manny.
I would be so curious to see how the shot list or the days of how they shot this. Like, did they just do all the running in like a day or whatever? Or did she have to perform after running in those scenes? Like, I'm really curious how they split that
Can you
up.
imagine, like, it's a cool, experimental, independent film. They probably shot over the course of like 4 weeks, and if they didn't do all the running in a day, having to do a little bit of that running every day and like put on those same clothes and just like sweat your ass off running over different parts of Berlin. Like, basically, this was an exercise in endurance, and we salute you, Franka. You're the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
The 90s. Can we talk about the 90s? Because I had not seen this movie before, so I was very glad that the audience
you've never
selected
seen
it. No, I had never seen it, and I'll tell you why. So the German title for this movie is Lola Run, and I know I'm mispronouncing it, but it's basically like Lola Runs. But the English title is Run Lola Run, and there was something about like the implied command of that title that just, I was like, I don't know. And also I wildly misunderstood the plot of the movie. And so I thought it was, I didn't know she only had 20 minutes. I thought it was like over the course of a day. And I thought it was like a fairly linear narrative whereby like she had to get a certain amount of money for her boyfriend, and she went to various different places trying to get more and more and was like building stuff up. I don't know where I got this idea, but I was just like, oh, okay, it sounds interesting, but not anything particularly like new. So I had never watched it, so I was blown away by what actually happened.
This has got to be a weird movie to watch for the first
time in
today.
2021. Yeah.
Carolyn, have you seen that movie before?
Yeah, I had. Okay. I saw it, in the window of its original release, and I remember thinking at the time that it was fresh and exciting. I mean, visually and structurally, because to me, it was a film that I sort of came out of, and I thought, well, this is obviously, even at that point, there had been films based on video games, right? There had been Mortal Kombat and Super Mario Brothers the movie and other such.
I can't believe we haven't talked about any of those movies.
Cinema. But I came out of this film feeling like, well, this is the first film I've seen that feels structurally like it has video game logic to it, in the sense that, and not that it was the first time loop movie I'd seen. Of course, Groundhog Day predates this, but because in this film, she essentially it plays out across what we might call like 3 lives, and it's like as soon as she hits what we might call a fail state in video game terms, either she sort of dies or is injured, or Manny dies or is injured. That's when it's like, nope, you have to start over, start again. I don't think Tom Tykwer was sort of, I don't know, maybe he was like influenced a bit by video games, but certainly like this, in that sense, this was a film that to me was like, okay, this is kind of interesting and exciting, and really seems to be a film that has that kind of logic to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. This movie is, I found it stressful to watch, which it's supposed to be, but partly because the filmmaking, I was like, this director is high as fuck, like tripping balls making this goddamn movie. Because go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, he and the whole production team are using like every kind of filmmaking thing possible in this, right? Like, they're throwing animation at you, they're throwing time loops, they're throwing like really like trippy sort of circular, like spirally kinds of imagery. Like, there's so much happening at any given moment, and I'm like, how do you keep all of that in your brain? And then there's like quick cuts to people's lives, like that don't really matter, but it obviously is part of the larger theme. They do.
What I noticed, like, this film is 80 minutes long. Like, as you say, they throw everything in this film, and yet it's not bloated. Like, there really was the danger and the potential for this to be like this hugely like puffed up, self-satisfied, smug excursion into like film, right, on a meta level. But instead, as Caro notes, like, it's incredibly propulsive. It keeps moving visually and narratively. And even though we only get those short, snippets, short windows into, well, what if this happened with this person, or this could have happened, whatever. I don't want to see, a 15-minute digression on the woman with the stroller. What you give me is perfect.
Totally. And also,
sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, it's also video game like, in that, like, there's no real character development, and it doesn't matter.
NPCs, baby. Everybody's an NPC.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, the film starts with us being thrust into this story that is already underway, right? Like Lola gets the phone call, and Manny is already in crisis. It doesn't. So we are like, bam, we're like strapped to this speeding train of a narrative, right? It's already like the crisis has started. There's not the setup and all of that. But and then those digressions that we get. So yeah, what happens is Lola will have these in each of the 3 scenarios. She'll have these like brief interactions with other people that play out a little differently each time, and then those people's lives spin off in wildly different directions each time, and it's implied that it's sort of, impacted by even that very brief interaction with Lola. And so this film really, like, it does have, and I think without being pompous about it, without being like sort of haughty or pretentious in the sense that, we might think of some films as pretentious or like didactic. there is a lot going on in this film philosophically about like the idea of chance, and which I really appreciate in the sense that, so for instance, the second loop, for lack of a better word in particular, totally ends with what we might call like a deus ex machina, right? Like Manny is just like hit by a van. And fundamentally it's like there are times where we might say, well, that's just really unsatisfying. That's like really like, it doesn't come out of the character action or development. It's just this random thing that happens. But clearly in this film, like that is a deliberate choice to embrace like that kind of like randomness, because, I think this film is in a way, it's positioned in opposition to so many films that suggest like, we totally shape our own destiny, and like we are the masters of our fate, and and thus we get like great men who achieve great things. Like I think that there's an interesting counter argument to that idea embedded in this film, because so much of what happens in this film is rooted in pure, almost like pure chance. Like Lola's moped was stolen before the film starts, and that like so many things play into that and reinforce that idea.
Yeah, and it's interesting that audiences really were dissatisfied by, Deus Ex Machina when it doesn't work for us, when it ends in a way that is unsatisfying to us because it's a character that we like, right? When something bad happens. So, Manny's hit by the speeding truck. I'm sorry. Manny is such a feckless character. I have the opposite reaction that you did, Anita. I felt no tension and anxiety in this film because I was like, if she doesn't save this guy, I do not care. Slow down, bro. Slow down. But we don't, say like, oh, this would never happen, or it doesn't bother us as much. When, for instance, in that same second time loop, Lola robs the bank. She comes out, is surrounded by police, but then, through a misunderstanding, is allowed to leave, right?
They don't think she couldn't possibly be the person who's robbing the bank, right? She's just a woman leaving the bank.
So that doesn't pull us out, but, but the ending potentially does. Look at this film. Gosh, I'm so glad. In a way, I'm kind of glad that I had never seen it until now, because I do wonder what my reaction would have been to it in 1998. In the same Guardian article that Anita read, like the retrospective looking back, I think it was just Franka Potente and the actor who played Manny. Am I correct, Anita, that it was just the two of them offering reminiscences? One of the things that that actor says, I think his name is Mathieu, says is, it was a really feminist film. And I think in 1999, I probably would have thought the same thing without really questioning what that means. He goes on to say, it's an action film, it's a thriller in which, the woman is not dependent upon a man to save. The same sort of, cliched arguments that people make for why something is or is not a piece of feminist media. People, I beg of you, can we expand our notion of what makes something feminist or not? And it should not, nor has it ever been, simply who is using the gun. Who is, that is that is not the end all be all. We are not asking for media in which, we kick ass just as much as or more than the folks who typically are allowed to on screen. That in and of itself does not make something feminist. And yet you hear this trotted out time and time again. If a woman is the main character, if, a woman is doing action stunts or whatever, it's like, oh, this is a feminist film. We really need to unpack why we think that's the case. Which is not to say the film is not necessarily, but I'm just saying that in and of itself is not the only criteria.
I completely 100% agree with you. But what I want to add to this is that I don't think we do that as much anymore. I think that we did that a lot in this moment when this movie came out and the following 5 or 10 years. But we don't do it because we do have more dynamic media. We have media that actually has feminist values embedded in them, that we don't have that sort of quote unquote strong female character conversation as much as we used to. But at the time, think about The Matrix being this huge revolutionary thing. We talked about it recently. What's her face?
Trinity.
Trinity
is considered this end all be all of a feminist character, which is the exact same critique that you're saying, Ebony. Like, she's not. And today when we look at it, she's not. But at the time, you know, like the context of it was, you know, those of us who were, well, I wasn't that critical then. I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about then. But I think that the larger consensus was that those are the only roles that women get, and aren't we lucky to have that, right?
Yeah, I agree. But I also think that, like, every time Charlize Theron puts out a movie these days, you know, like an action film, you know, Atomic Blonde or The Old Guard or whatever.
Fucking Fury Road, I will go.
We still hear this. You know, it may not be as much, but yeah, I do think that, like, there's still, you can still count on reading, you know, some version of, you know, how great is it for this feminist take on the action genre in all of those reviews. I
don't see that as much. And I think movies like, I don't know, Ava and Lucy and all the like first name female character movies that are like, you know, the super secret spy, like those are bombing. Like that, I think that we're actually shifting in our expectations and understandings of this particular type of trope. I mean, you don't have to agree with me. That's just my take.
I don't.
Wow. Okay.
No, I'm thinking about, you know, what you're saying, because I think, you know, you're right on some level, but I do still think that there is a common kind of understanding, like superficial understanding of, you know, woman with gun equals feminist.
I definitely encounter,
I
like,
hear that.
outside of like extremely online sort of media critical circles, I will encounter at, you know, parties and stuff, sort of, you know, liberal folks who will say, yeah, oh my God, like, they'll know that I'm like a feminist, I'm into pop culture, and will say stuff like, oh my God, Atomic Blonde, like, have you seen that? It's so feminist because Charlize Theron is the spy or whatever, and she does all the, you know, she's the one who kicks ass, and, you know, like, and I'll just sort of like nod and smile,
okay.
You know. So yeah, I think there is a larger world in which that's still sort of the perception.
Yes, and also I'll say, to sort of backpedal slightly, is that even in the films or the media that I think are more complex, you know, Run Lola Run has one woman in it. It has her like shitty mom and like the one woman that's like sexist, like being really shitty.
Not her mom.
Well, it has her mom, and it has that like the mistress, and then it has the woman on the sidewalk. Like,
right.
Anyways,
Sorry.
That's not the point I'm trying to make.
I was thinking of
the that we still, you know, I don't know. I was looking up Regina King recently for other reasons, but like, you know, it was even something like in Watchmen, which I think is really a really interesting television show that did really, really cool stuff. You know, we're still like, oh damn, like you're a badass chick because you're violent, and you're just as violent, and you can take down all the dudes. Like so I'm agreeing on that we haven't like gotten that out of our psyche, our collective psyche yet.
Also, I mean, I don't think like the problem with, you know, for me, the problem with, say, the conversation around Fury Road, you know, is not that it's not a feminist film. It's that people think it is a feminist film, right? So then you have to say, no, it's, you know, whatever. It's not a feminist film. Like, Run Lola Run, I think it's cool that she's the protagonist. And I think it's, like, it could certainly be worse. Like, she could be, like, totally super sexualized and, like, whatever. Like,
but Fury Road, the conversations around Fury Road happened during that period of time that I'm talking about, right? I think if Fury Road came out today, there would definitely be a similar reaction of people who fucking love it, but there would be a lot more folks that aren't just me being like, yo, can we be a little more nuanced about this? I think I
get you. I mean, but Fury Road came out in 2015. Like, it wasn't that long ago, I guess.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, are we criticizing Run Lola Run for not being, like, more feminist? I mean,
no. I only bring it up because my point was just that, like, the thing that people identify as, you know, the feminist aspect of it is inevitably, you know, the action, the violence, etc. Right? But they never talk about, for instance, like, you know, how Lola is routinely let down by all of the men in her life, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can talk about that in a feminist way, or talk about how that is offered up on that level. Like, Manny, God bless him, is just useless. And also, as I said, I would not have expended 2 minutes of running, let alone 20 minutes worth of flat out running in Doc Marten boots for him. But also, her dad is a fucking jerk, you know? The way
and the creepy security guard. Like,
yeah, you know, like,
yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, like, there's stuff that we could point out. But I was just disappointed that they were like, oh, it's a feminist film.
Yeah.
It's like, just because a woman is the protagonist, just because, you know, you get it, obviously. I'm just repeating myself at this point.
No. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, that conversation is absolutely a problem.
Go ahead.
Oh, I do want to go back briefly to what you were saying, Anita, about the energy of this film. You know, you said that Tom Tykwer was like high as fuck the whole time, and like this film has what feels to me like a clubby energy, right? It feels like very, even though none of it takes place in a dance club or anything, like it has that like late 90s clubby energy to it.
As soon as that like pounding electronic bass, and I was like, electronic music plus Germany plus the end of the 90s. Yep. Oh my God, we are in for a ride.
Yeah. And interestingly, I mean, part of the reason I had you mention The Matrix in that little intro text that I wrote is that Tom Tykwer has gone on to repeatedly collaborate with the Wachowskis. I feel, so interesting. I feel like there was a bit of kindred spiritness between them as filmmakers in their kind of pushing the envelope and in the energy, that they were, that their work exudes. So Tom Tykwer has worked with them on Cloud Atlas and on Sense8 as like co-director, writer person. And I think so. And now he more recently is the, I believe, creator of Babylon Berlin, which is a show I've not watched, but is quite, at least a lot of people love that show. So
check that out.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how Franka Potente goes from this in 1998, 99, and then The Bourne Identity in 2002, which I found really interesting because I, again, had not seen Run Lola Run, but knew that she was from that film. And she's like, The Bourne Identity. Okay, yes, we can talk about my love for films that celebrate the international state apparatus, law enforcement. I get it, y'all. I get it. But I do love The Bourne Identity. I love all the Bourne movies. But yeah, it is, now that I have seen Run Lola Run, I'm like, it's so interesting that she was the actor that was cast to play what is essentially a very passive role in The Bourne Identity, right? She's someone who is able to offer like some advice to Matt Damon's character, Jason Bourne, in the film about like, various ways to get around whatever, but he already knows everything. He's able to take care of everything with his, Jason Bourne foo, like she essentially like drives him around in a car and loves him, and puts up with him, but she doesn't get to do it. I just found it very interesting having now seen this.
I wonder if, if it's like that situation where, your career is expanding, you have more international sort of more high paying, high profile Hollywood roles available to you, but they're like these kinds of shitty, definitely a step down in a sense in terms of like the kind of having agency or focus in a film, feminist or not, that Run Lola Run has. Isn't her character also like just sort of dispatched rapidly, like at the start of like this following.
Exactly. So like her presence and like her haunting of Jason Bourne throughout the remainder of the other two films is in absence. It's the fact that she's been, fridged, like she's been dispatched. So yeah, just interesting. But again, the 90s, like this took me right back. The minute the music queued up, the minute I saw the clothes, I was just like,
so epically,
God.
It's time,
It is, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I loved it. I missed it.
I do want to talk about a part in the film, if we can.
We should.
It is kind of related to this conversation about, like, is it or isn't it a feminist movie, which is not the conversation we're having. But in the first run through, the first loop, Lola dies, and in the second loop, Manny dies. And in between those, there is a vignette with them laying in bed together. And I found those very frustrating and illuminating, because, when we talk about whether something is a feminist film or not, I'm like, well, what values is it putting forth ultimately? And, like Manny's kind of a piece of shit dude, right? Like, he's like, oh, you got to help me. And then at the very end, he's like, I got it, babe. I got it. What are you stressed about? And you're like,
have you been running?
Yeah. But in those, I thought it was really interesting. So the first one is like, it's this almost whimsical kind of conversation. Whimsical is not the right word, but this conversation about like whether they should come back to life or not, told through the lens of their relationship. And so the first one is Lola saying like, do you love me? And I found it really frustrating because in it, if you take it as like a conversation between two lovers, it really perpetuated and fed into the like women are needy and need like all of this attention and need to like blah, blah, blah. But really, this guy is a doofus and can't articulate his feelings. And it's not unreasonable for like his partner to want him to articulate how he feels. But because it's framed in a way where she sounds like she just sounds like a needy, annoying woman in that like stereotypical sort of way. At the very end, you realize that it's about whether she's going to come back to life or not. And that like changes it slightly. I found that really frustrating. And then the reverse where it's, when he dies, his framing is, what would you do if I died? And it's not like, do you love me? Do you care about me? It's like, you're going to go and hook up with somebody else and this guy is going to be sensitive and he's going to listen to you talk and blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, both of those scenes just perpetuated so many gendered stereotypes that I found really troubling.
I mean, they both struck me as the kinds of conversation, as not too far removed from the kinds of conversations that a lot of younger people have when they're in like relationships for the first time, and maybe they're like insecure, but I think you have that thing where like you want your partner to read your mind and like know exactly like what they're supposed to say, and when they don't, you get like pissed off at them for it or whatever. Like, and I was just kind of, so I'm like rolling my eyes and being like, but also feeling like, I probably had conversations that not too far removed from that when I was like 16.
And it's not like they have the healthiest relationship, so maybe it is like fair to show that, but it's also not it's not framed in a way that is like this is their toxic relationship that they have necessarily, right?
No, not at all.
But I totally hear you. Like, I think yes.
One of the things that I read, sorry, I was just thinking, that made me think about that relationship and how you're saying like it's not painted as like it's these two specific people. I read Roger Ebert's review of the film from back when it came out, and I think he gave it like 3 out of 5 stars.
Excuse me, Roger Ebert rated movies on a 4-star scale.
Okay, so he gave it 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
He never got a chance to meet my brother, so was never introduced to the Brian Hudson 100-star scale. Anyways, so he gave it 3 stars. But one of the things he said was that, as much as he enjoyed it, and found Lola a really interesting character, he never really felt like he got a handle on who she was. And so I've been thinking about that, and about what you were just saying, Anita, because that's true to a certain extent, but I also think there are moments in the film that give us just a brief moment to sit with who this young woman is and why she would do this, as she sometimes is working it out for herself. And so there's that great, just like brief scene in the second loop where she's, holding up the bank. She's got a gun. She's about to get the 100,000 marks. And the security guard says, like, you don't want to hurt anyone, do you? And you see her like ask herself, like, do I want to do this? And she says, I don't know. And I just found like, again, this film, it's only 80 minutes long. And yet there were moments where we got a little space, even in the course of this rapid fire movie, that do offer us some peek into why this woman would behave the way that she does and why she might be committed to this bullshit ass relationship. And then you see what kind of relationship her parents have, and you can see like she's not getting the best modeling here, so it's a film that encourages you to think outside of the box of its 80 minutes.
I also loved her screaming.
Yeah.
Like the like sort of female rage in some ways, where she's just like, I'm going to scream until things work out and like happen the way that I need them to happen. There's something really like physical and just emotional about those moments.
Man,
this movie is wackadoodle.
It is. So glad to have watched it though.
Fun fact. Bon Jovi's music video for It's My Life like recreates this movie. It recreates the movie to some degree, except it's like a young man who gets a call from a woman and she's at a concert and he has to run to the concert.
So it's John Bon Jovi running?
No, it's not him. It's some.
Oh, because that would have been hilarious.
Would it?
Yeah, it would have been. I would have immediately ended this podcast and jumped to YouTube.
I mean... yeah, it's not that good. All right, that's my fun. The little Wikipedia entry talks about all the like. This movie is everybody has heard of this movie. Like it's such a pop culture historical thing, right? It's influenced so many different aspects. Like I was reading the Wikipedia article about the influences, and one was like, you know, there's an episode of Buffy where there's like a redheaded woman running through the streets of Germany, and you're like, yeah, that's like not that every time there's a redheaded character, it's a reference to Run Lola Run, but like it's just so present in our minds. Like her hair, like as teenagers, we were all like, she's so cool, you know. Apparently, the film was an initial inspiration in Majora's Mask for video game fans.
The three. So yeah, in Majora's Mask, it takes place over 3 days, and then you fail inevitably, and then the 3 days start over again and again and again until you get it right. So that makes sense. Yeah. So interestingly for me, that a film that struck me as having video game logic then in turn went on to, you know, supposedly at least influence at least one very, very significant video game.
It's interesting that we talked about Fury Road because so I have feelings about movies that are like video games, and I think that there are two kinds. There are ones that are like this, that are really intentional and are video gamey, but not as a criticism. Like I'm not using that as a way
as like a pejorative. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. But I think Fury Road is a game that's like a video game. Fury Road is like a video game, and I mean that in a bad way.
Right.
Like that is a movie that I'm like, oh, you're gonna like, you have all these roadblocks and you have like all these gates you have to get past, and then you turn around and have to go back, and it's like a fucking video game. And like that was another reason why I did not like that movie. But I think that there are ways in which video game. You know, I'm actually would be interested in someone on YouTube making a video that breaks down like what when it works and when it doesn't in films.
I mean, you mentioned Edge of Tomorrow, also very much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there were ads for that film that, you know, billboards and posters and things that basically said like "live, die, repeat" or something like that. That was the original title in the language or book or something. It was, I don't know how it got to be. I think it was,
same thing. I don't know how that got to be Edge of Tomorrow, whereas like Run Lola Run, why wasn't it just Lola Runs as the like direct translation?
Run Lola Run is more marketable in English. I think Lola Run.
And it is very punchy. When I started thinking of it less as a command, like an external command, but something she says to herself, because you know how like she talks to herself as she runs, then I liked it more, you know? And like I said,
also
I was wildly misinformed. Yeah. So absolutely. I'm cool with it.
Anyway,
which I'm
somebody make that video for me, please. I'm making a request to all of YouTube that someone should make a video about video games' influence on film.
And then also someone used deep fake technology to put John Bon Jovi in It's My Life video and have him running through the streets of Berlin.
Please don't do that. I will pay you to not do that. Please. Thank you.
I will pay you $1 more to do it.
I can't get that dumb song out of my head now, though. I regret watching it. It's fine. Let's move on. Are we done?
Well, we're done.
I think so.
All right. We'll be right back with some Freq Outs.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to FFR. If you enjoy our weekly conversations about the intersection of feminism and pop culture, consider hopping over to patreon.com/femfreak and joining our podcast community. You can get access to exclusive bonus episodes, join our friendly Discord server, participate in polls to help decide topics for future episodes, and more. Plus, you'll be helping us keep bringing FFR to the virtual podcast airwaves. Visit patreon.com/femfreak today.
What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn?
Yeah. This is a quick one, but so there's a documentary that I think it's not a new documentary, but I think it's just recently sort of resurfaced or been made available online for viewing. And it's on the website Mubi. And the name of the documentary is Meeting the Man, James Baldwin in Paris. And it's just 25 minutes. It's a 25-minute documentary where these like white, British, I want to say, filmmakers, basically like hang out with James Baldwin for a bit and kind of, interview him, but also like interrogate him, but sort of like they're not immediately like receptive in a lot of ways to James Baldwin's ideas and his ethic, but like just the opportunity to be around James Baldwin in this sort of vicarious virtual way for even as brief a time as 25 minutes and to be exposed to his intellect and to his, to the just deeply apparent ways in which love, like his love for Black people, motivates his anger, his work at his literature, his work as a writer, his whole way of being in the world and like what drives him as a person. It's incredible. Like just the way that he speaks, like the things that come out of his mind and just emerge into the world as these like incredibly, you just can't help, at least I just can't help but be like blindsided again and again by the rigor, the intellectual rigor, the profound, emotional depth, everything he says. It's remarkable. I mean, he of course was absolutely remarkable, and and of course, like for instance, there is one point in this film where he says, something, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm putting it in super basic Caro language, but I mean, the way he articulates it is profoundly beautiful. He says something like, someday, next, Tuesday or Wednesday, the oppressed people of the world will rise up and dismantle the systems that oppress them. And I mean, again, he says it in such a poetic and beautiful way. And I hear that and I'm like, and it just resonates like so vividly and with such urgency, even now, as like we, are still waiting and still feeling that possibility that maybe next Tuesday or next Wednesday, we will remake the world. But anyway, yes, again, it's 25 minutes long, but it is unforgettable in my view. So I highly encourage people to seek it out.
I can't wait to check this out. I've not heard of it. And James Baldwin, as you said, like, was one of those writers that would stop you in your tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And and it wasn't enough that the man could like extemporaneously just blow your mind, in an interview. but also his essays, and then had the nerve to have that talent with fiction too. Come on.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
I remember the first time I like saw a video or heard an interview with him, I was so blown away and was so angry that like I'd never heard of him before. Right? Like he's one of those people that you're like, why aren't we learning about him in the history books? I mean, we can answer that question, but
right. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
It's racism.
Jeez. Cool. Thanks, Carolyn.
Yeah, you bet.
I have read a book and a half that I've not been happy with, so I don't have any book freakouts, and I'm really bummed because, you know, I like a good book, and I don't like a bad book. And I just
Weird.
I read one that was like meh, and it was so long, and I really wanted to know what happened, so I just like did it. And then the second book, I got 40% through, and it's with an author I really, really like and admire. And I just was like, I can't read another book that I'm slogging my way through.
I want you to DM me the name of this book.
I will, and then I'm not gonna say it publicly, but
I have to say, I admire how much reading you do and how many books you read. Like, I love books and I love reading, but I don't get through nearly as many books at this point in my life as I once did. And, God, I wish I had your voracious.
this is how I do it. I only read fiction.
Sure.
which I like. I feel badly that I don't read as much nonfiction, but I only read fiction, and I read every night before I go to sleep. Like, it is extremely rare that I will not read, and if I don't have a book on deck, I get kind of panicky because I've spent years building this habit. Yeah. And obviously, like, I will read books during the day, or if I'm really into it, I'll read during the day, or when I have some time. But that's how I get through them. So I usually get through like it takes me a while. Like, I'll get through a book a month because some nights I can only read a little bit before I fall asleep. But for me, like, because a lot of people say that to me, in terms of like, oh, I wish I read as much, and I was like, I just built this habit into my life from years and years of doing this.
No, it's great.
I love it. I'm currently reading a book whose name I'm totally forgetting right now, but I like it so far. I'm really excited. I'm back in space.
Hey,
I spent too long not being in space. Like the other books took place on this planet. That was fucking boring. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, we want to hear what you're thinking about playing with, doing, reading, watching. So please submit your freakouts at feministfrequency.com/FREQOUT. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Join us next week as we discuss Minari, a beautiful and critically acclaimed new film about a Korean-American family's pursuit of the American dream, which is now available for rent on streaming services everywhere. Also, if you are a patron, join us in the bonus where I'm going to talk extensively about the Golden Globes that just happened this weekend, if that's your thing. I mean, Carolyn and Ebony might have had other plans, but I just derailed them.
Nope.
Sarkeesian!
Our show is engineered by Rob Parrott. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.